this kind of situations were actually categorized that three things went up. One, cruelty by husbands or relatives, 32%, kidnapping and aggression of women, 19%, assault on women's intent to outrage, 18%, and rape, 9%. And NCRB hasn't provided us any data for the last 2 years instead of gang rape and killing. That data is still awaiting. Not only the number of pending sexual harassment cases at the workplaces in India's largest companies shows an alarming rise of 101% in the year ending March 2023, indicating a huge backlog of complaints and the company's inability to resolve such cases in a timely manner. There were 147 pending cases out of a total 772 complaints in financial year of 2023. It shows, Forbes India analysis based on company annual reports show that anti-sexual harassment advisory firm Comply Carco. This analysis considers only actually BSE 100 ESG index. According to Vishal Kandia, founder and director of Comply Carco Services, a rise in the number of complaints would indicate that employees are increasingly becoming aware and feeling empowered to come forward and make sexual harassment complaints before internal complaints committees. However, since ICCs are not resolving the complaints quickly, and this is very important, it will have a dampening effect on employees' willingness to air their grievances as they want prompt and fair resolutions. So ICC's actually internal complaints committees are full with complaints, but hardly anything is being resolved. We can give lots of local cases even, but we'll refrain from that and let two experts will speak on that. So the purpose of this interactive workshop in the background against this and deliberations on whether legislative reforms are catalyst to gender justice or the modernization of the legal reform is merely an integral facet of the neoliberal social order of contemporary unequal India. So this is the exact purpose in the life of this brief historical position. We do things slightly differently. So after this, we will start with a song from Rabindranath. We feel that the song might be able to give a hint what we are trying to tell in terms of gender justice in India. The song is from Rabindranath's Chitrangada, a very famous play, and the song is, if Javeri doesn't know, for the sake of Javeri, it is, Chitrangada was Manipur's king's daughter who wanted a son, but actually a daughter was born. So king decided to rear her as a boy, giving all qualities a boy should have. And that's what Chitrangada is stating. Second part of the story is though appalling, and Rabindranath should be criticized that he made Chitrangada again a woman because Chitrangada fell in love with Arjun. In order to satisfy Arjun, Chitrangada wanted to be a woman again. So that shows a real contradiction. I would say a woman is an individual until a man tells woman that she is not. I finish with this contradictory remark so that you all can reflect on it, and then when they will speak, we will have the Q&A. Shubhaparna. Shubhaparna is a research scholar in the Department of Performing Arts at SNU and an excellent singer, so I have requested Shubhaparna to sing the song.
Ami Chitrangada, Ami Rajendra Nandayani, Nahi Devai, Nahi Shama যা করে মোরে রাখে সে যদি পাশে রাখো মোরে সংকটে সম্পদে ছেলেতে সম্মতি দাও যদি কঠিন ব্রতে সহায় হতে পাবে তবে তুমি ছেলেতে মোরে আজ শুধু করি নিবেদন আমি চিত্রাঙ্গদা রাজেন্দ্র নন্দিনী।
Thank you, Shubhaparna. Sadhu, sadhu. Okay, now is the time to go to the right to the first speaker, who is sitting beside me, Ruchira Goswami. Ruchira Goswami teaches at National University of Juridical Sciences, Kolkata, where she offers courses in sociology, gender and law, child rights and film, and law. She was the head of the Center for Child Rights in UGS, a multidisciplinary center set up in partnership with UNICEF with the mandate of research, documentation, and advocacy on child rights issues. A British chevening scholar in human rights from the London School of Economics, her areas of interest include feminist movements and legal reforms, children's rights, representation of law in films, and intellectual property and human rights. She has taught in several institutions, including Calcutta University, Presidency University, Jadavpur University, IIS, WBM, Kolkata, and International Development Studies, University of Oslo, Norway. She has co-authored the book, The Violent Domestic, Law, Its Practice and Strategies of Survival, published by Zuban in 2022. Her recent research projects, including Surviving Violence, a multi-stage research project on understanding survival and resilience of domestic violence survivors. She was also involved in 2 other research projects as project director on implementation of the protection of children from the Sexual Offences Act in West Bengal, sponsored by UNICEF Office of West Bengal in 2016, as co-investigator in the ICSSR, Indian Council of Social Science Research, sponsored projects, reconceptualizing domestic violence, shifting discourses within the women's movement. She is closely associated with several human rights and women's rights organizations. And last but not the least, she is my student and a gem of one. Ruchira?
I have this side.
You can do
Good afternoon, everybody. It's an honor, pleasure, and a privilege to be here to discuss things that interest me, and to also have 2 of my teachers here with me, and also a very good friend in Chandni, and it's lovely to meet everybody. because we'll be discussing gender justice, and I'll sort of just set the tone. That is what I've been told to do. To not talk of the entire rubric of gender justice because it's a huge area, but to choose just one law and its implementation and perhaps a socio-legal, historical analysis of the evolution of a particular law that affects all of us, women and men in workplace. And so I'll be talking about the prevention of sexual harassment of women in workplace, and how did the law come into being, and where are we with the law today. So that is what I intend to do. Of course, the discussion cannot be only on what we call the positive law, which is what is the black letter of the law, but really about what are we doing with the law, or how is the law being formulated, or what are the changes, etc., etc. So, as was said in the introduction, if we look at 1980s in India as a watershed of legislative reforms around women's rights, and what a lot of feminist scholars in India have been saying is that these changes in the law for women came as a result, not completely, but largely as a result of the autonomous women's movements in India, which there is clearly a timeline, and the timeline was Mathura rape case, and what followed after the Mathura rape case, after the judgment in 1978 by the Supreme Court, which said that Mathura is a tribal girl, and she's accustomed to sexual intercourse, and so she wasn't raped. Also that she was in relationship with this boy, which was a premarital sexual relationship, and therefore, and she did not cry out, etc., etc., so she wasn't raped. What followed was an open letter to the Chief Justice of India by 4 very renowned law professors saying what is the kind of constitutional equality that we are talking about. I mean, how can you even say she's 16? By that time, this idea of children's rights did not come in India, that, under 18, etc. So that conversation didn't happen, but, that fact that whether she was tribal, whether she was accustomed to sexual relations is irrelevant, and what about constitutional equality, etc., etc. All of this sort of came, and there was a spur of women's rights organizations, and these were autonomous. Autonomous would mean that none of these women's rights groups were associated with any political parties. They were mostly non-funded, and they were sort of secular organizations. And from there we see a plethora of legal changes that come in, legislative changes, and the women's rights movement in India kind of gave the fillip for these changes to come. So in that line of several such laws relating to violence against women and women's right in workplace, equal remuneration, etc., etc., much later on the picture, we find this law, which is Sexual Harassment at Workplace Prevention and Prohibition Law. But this law is 10 years old, a little more than 10 years, 2013. But let me go back to what started this law. This law is a decade old. But the story of this law is far ahead, in 1990s. So if we can, yes, can we go to the background? So just to, yes. So this is 1992 in India. This is 1992 in India. In Rajasthan, a social worker called Bhauri Devi was fighting child marriage. She was appointed by the government of Rajasthan to fight child marriage practices. She was warned by local people who looked at marriage as very sacrosanct, and she was warned of dire consequences. She tried to resist, and she was gang raped as a punishment for what she was doing. While as an Indian citizen, Bhavri was entitled to go to court to use the laws of the land, the question that came for the first time about working women was that what about the job, what about the responsibility of the workplace? You know, she was sexually assaulted because she was fighting child marriage as a worker of the government of Rajasthan. So, you know, it was their work. And if something happened to her as a result of that, then doesn't the workplace have any responsibility? Doesn't the employer have responsibility? This led to a case which is famously known as Vishakha case. Vishakha was the organization that took this case up and started talking about the responsibility of the workplace. And we come up with the Supreme Court comes up with Vishakha guidelines in 1997 that ruled all workplaces. This, from 1997 to 2013, this was in operation, Vishakha guidelines. So technically, they do not have the power of the law. They are persuasive, but strongly persuasive, but they are not law in itself. Yes, you treat this as law till a statutory law comes in. Right. Apart from that, India has been a signatory, which is they are a member, they have signed, they have ratified this international convention called CEDAW, Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Violence Against Discrimination Against Women. And because India is under an international obligation to promote, protect, and fulfill women's rights in general and in workplace, so that is why law was one of the agenda of the Indian state. They had to, because, you know, so protecting women or prohibiting any kind of sexual harassment at workplace is a job of the state. So what does, next slide please, what does this law do? So as I said, so any case of sexual harassment at workplace, I'm only talking of workplace, is a violation of all constitutional rights to equality, non-discrimination, etc. It also goes against the principles of CEDAW and the obligation that the Indian state had taken. And so what does this act really do? Post-Vishakha in 2013, when this statutory law came through. What is a statutory law? A statutory law is one law that is made in order to tackle one socio-legal issue, right? So you can have a statutory law which is trying to prohibit child marriage, which is trying to prohibit dowry, which is trying to prohibit sexual offenses on children, and this is another one, right? So what about this law? This law looks at the woman as a complainant, which is important, and the respondent. Who can bring in a complaint? A woman. Against whom? A man. And here the Pandora's box is already opened, right? And we will come to that in a while. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is a workplace? So if we go back to Vishakha, from Vishakha till 2013, the sense of the workplace was largely a kind of a public sector, formal sector undertaking. The understanding was like that. But when we come with the law, because there were a lot of learnings from 1990s to 2013, everything was brought into a workplace, both private sector, public sector, formal spaces, informal spaces. Everything is a workplace, including spaces which are masculine. For example, sports stadiums, right? Hospitals, nursing homes, etc., including, very interesting, the dwelling place or our home. Our homes are workplaces for women who come as domestic workers. So if something happens to her, sexually assault, a case of sexual harassment in my home, then she can use the law because my home is a workplace for her. That is the ambit of the law. Now, the more you spread the net wide, there is a problem of implementation, right? But it was important to look at educational institutions, hospitals, stadiums, etc. as workplaces. So it covers both the formal and the informal, the organized, the unorganized, the public and the private sphere. Next, please. So what is sexual harassment? A lot of it has come from the Vishaka, and there has been an expansion. Physical, psychological, all of them. Making sexually colored remarks, etc., etc. This, we understand very easily, so I'm skipping. I have a time to finish, so next. Also, what is sexual harassment? Any implicit promise or a detrimental treatment. Both would constitute sexual harassment. And gradually you see that it has a more subjective spacing. See? Interference, intimidation, offensive, hostile. There is no objective thing that this is hostile. What is hostile to me might not be hostile to you. What is hostile to a young woman might not be hostile to an elderly, experienced man in a workplace. And humiliating treatment. Now there is a question about what constitutes humiliation, etc., etc. Next, please. This is important because sexual harassment at workplace is any behavior that is unwelcome. Unwelcome by the person towards whom the behavior is directed. It is sexual in nature, which is sexual in the sense it can also mean gendered. It is a subjective experience. It is the impact and not the intent. I really didn't mean it vis-a-vis, but this is how I looked at it, right? So we see that there is a subjectivity and it occurs in a matrix of power. So these are very important constituents of the law, right? If you read the law between the lines, this is what comes through. Why in a matrix of power? Because the question was, in a workplace, who will assure you preferential treatment? The boss, right? Somebody who is the employer, somebody who is up in the power hierarchy. And the point that was shown that globally as well as in India, if you look at workplaces, formal workplaces, then they are pyramidal. And at the top of the pyramid are mostly men, and at the bottom of the pyramid are mostly younger women. So it is not just by chance and accidentally that secretary positions, not to denigrate the position in any way, are positions where you take orders, where you don't give orders. And those positions are always more or less occupied by women, and largely middle class, upper middle caste, middle-aged men are in control in the power dynamics. So the workplace is actually done like that, and that sort of answers this question as to why isn't this law gender neutral? Because that question came in. Why couldn't have been this law been gender neutral? Is it only men who harass women? Is a question. Can't women harass other women? Maybe they do. But do women harass other women sexually? Not too sure. Can women harass men? Maybe. But unfortunately, the NCRB doesn't give us a lot of data, which takes us back to questions of patriarchy and masculinity. Either men are harassed by women, but their masculinity comes in the way, that it's good to be a harasser, but that I am harassed, it's very difficult for young men to say this, right? So it could be, or that clearly men are less harassed by women, and because law depends on some kind of statistics, the NCRB shows that women are far more sexually assaulted and harassed compared to men. But the question of whether anybody can harass anybody keeps on coming back. But the point is that we see that it's far more towards women and far more by men towards women. Next, please. So this is where a lot of questions, this is the Internal Complaints Committee. It's now called the IC, Internal Committee. And there is a composition, there is a presiding officer, more than half should be women, there has to be one external member, a term of office is 3 years. So this is the composition, there should at least be 4 members. For informal unorganized sector, there is something called a local complaints committee, the local complaints committee's operation is really weak. We hardly even know where the local complaints committee exists. Who are the people? What do they do? So that is a problem. Can we move? Yeah, so I am at this moment skipping this, but there is an existence of a local complaints committee. This is its membership. On paper, and then if you do a little bit of homework, maybe you will find a couple of them, but it's kind of difficult. There needs to be a lot more work done on this. Please, next. Okay, so what happens? Written complaint within, from the last date from a series of incidents, right? From the last date, etc., the IC then looks into it and gives its recommendation and the report to the employer. The employer is supposed to take action in accordance with service rules if sexual misconduct has been proved. If the allegation is proved true, then the employer has to take action. This range of, it can be a range of actions in accordance with the service rules. This range of action can be suspension to termination. It could be anything, right? There is a punishment for false and malicious complaint, but you have to prove that it is false. The IC has to prove that the complaint is false, that she deliberately wanted to settle a score against this man, and that is why she brought a false complaint. The IC has to prove it. If it couldn't be proven, even the IC members understand something must have happened, but nobody really knows. It's grey, it's inconclusive, you could not find the allegation to be true, but then it is not a false it's not a false complaint. There is a distinction between this. A big role of the IC is prevention, to do gender, to gender sensitization workshops, etc., etc. Next slide, please. So this is the thing. Something that is happening, and I think I'll just end on this note. One, I already said that should the law be gender neutral is a conversation that has happened. That was sort of not taken into cognizance, saying that because workplaces where women find themselves on the receiving end much more than men, that is why it can't be gender neutral. The other thing that is now happening is that when the law came in 10 years back, the understanding of the law that it is happening in a power of matrix. So it's like teacher doing to student, supervisor doing to PhD student, head of the department doing to a young woman professor who's come in, employer, the boss doing it to the, the one who is under him. Interestingly, sexual harassment claims are now changing, and instead of being vertical claims, they're also becoming horizontal claims, right? One student against another, one employee against another, and then those claims become more and more difficult because then you cannot use the power dynamics in the workplace, And in a lot of these cases, we see that there has been a prior relationship, and immediately prior history is brought in and said, no, they were friends before, they in fact went out, something must have happened, and she's brought now a case against him. And they become very gray areas for the IC to actually understand and evaluate. Also, a lot of these, the inquiries made by the ICs are then rendered futile if the case goes to court. Because technically by the law, it both can happen. It can go to court, it can also carry on in the university or in the official space. But generally, when it goes to court, the question is like, is the court more important, so should I stop? The answer is no. IC should complete its inquiry. Let the court give me an order that you stop the inquiry. But we are so scared of the legal, we will not do the case. But that's not what is to be done. So those are majorly gray areas of the law, and I think that is what we should also, when they go to court, they say that there is, the way IC conducted its meetings is wrong. The way they wrote down the report is wrong. They did not sign on every page. The date is wrong. and it's just squashed. So all of this becomes very important. IC members should clearly know what it is, so that it is what we call a very solid evidence is brought through, what kind of questions they can do, can't do, you cannot ask back questions, etc. So I think there are two things that are happening. This conversation on gender neutrality of the law has happened for sexual harassment. It's also happened for rape laws. And this fear of women being troublemakers actually came back after this law was formulated. The question is, oh my God, so any woman can now bring in a complaint. And because it is hostile, intimidating, and subjective, anybody is very scared. So like if you go to a doctor, and if a woman goes to a doctor's chamber or during any kind of ultrasonography, they will ask a woman to be there. Professors are also saying, oh, if a woman student comes after 4 o'clock, I will keep my door open. I will have it in a common space. I mean, bagane boshe class nebo. But I will not call this girl into my chamber, because you never know what she was going to do. How do I defend myself? That is not really the point of the law. And I think it is also misreading the law. But it is a question of how do you assess one claim against another, and what is the line of control, which is now also happening. We don't know what remarks we can or we cannot pass. So I make a generic remark that 10 years back was just a silly remark in passing, but today will now constitute sexual harassment. When this guy is now called to the IC, he's like, yeah, I didn't do it. Oh my God, I was just appreciating her. Or just saying, oh, you have put on weight after marriage. Don't. The answer is very simple. The answer is, if my relationship with that other person is not proximate enough, I will steer clear of making such comments. What we say, it's better to err on the side of caution. If I'm not too close to you, I will not say, "Are baba, mota hoche to beard pori." I will not make that comment. I don't think women can make it, and men need to be really careful not to make it, because you never know, or so these callous comments can draw us into a sexual harassment claims. What women can wear or not wear. You cannot wear this and come to a nice educational institution. Don't make that comment as an administrator. You might just get into problems with a 19-year-old who will turn around and say, how dare you comment on what I wear and come in the workplace. So these are the kinds of cases that are now coming, and I think a lot of this can be addressed by looking at prevention. That is where the answer lies. So more of these kinds of workshops can be helpful. I'll stop here at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruchira. It was really, really heartening. Dangerously, move dangerously. No, actually, Ruchira didn't say that, and I will say in the question hour, I say, Devoshi is their Dean of Law and Professor, where actually the trouble lies. I mean, we will discuss that. I mean, that is the basic idea of sensitization, where actually trouble lies. I mean, if a 71-year-old lady can be told that she should tone her skins and go to VLCC and spend 1,20,000, that's a derogatory comment for which one can complain to ICC. But someone doesn't. Anyway, thinks that the person is joking. But if that can be construed, that can be done. Anyway, that was made to me. So let me now go to Javeri Panchal, the second expert of ours, and let me give a very brief review. Javeri is a very veteran person. She did her social work BSW from University of Mumbai. Then she did her MSW specializing in child welfare from TIS Mumbai, and then she did her PhD in social work, TIS Mumbai. Professional affiliations on board of NGOs, Chairperson Shamavedana Gopal, Chairperson of Vikalpa Shastri Udaipur, Member Board of Trustee of Humsafar Uttar Pradesh, on Internal Complaints Committee for Sexual Harassment at Workplace, Government Departments, PSUs, corporate and law firms, research into violence against women, girl-child sexual abuse, gender and sexuality, law and its implementation, masculinities and working with state system. Faculty in charge of 2 field projects, Resource Center on Intervention on Violence Against Women and Special Cell for Women and Children, Maharashtra. We are actually conducting this one in a little different way so that the authors, speakers can finish and then we'll go to Q&A. Javeri, it's all yours. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Am I audible is the question I'm going to ask.
Absolutely, it's the question of the century. You are audible.
Lovely. So I'm going to share my PPT so that if somebody misses something, we can have, people can catch up. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me and introducing me in such an elaborate way. Thank you very much. To introduce myself, I'm a practicing academician. So I'm a academician where I have a large body of work which I've done on the field, and now I'm teaching at Tata Institute of Social Sciences and School of Social Work. So today my topic is practicing gender justice, and I'm going to heavily rely upon my work on the special cell model, which works on violence against women in the police stations. So to begin with, I want to just set the tone. Obviously, my previous speaker has already talked about how gender justice is very elusive, and we have a lot of gender justice is very relative, and it talks about unequal power, and we are talking about gender justice, which entails ending the inequalities. And how do we do that? Ending inequalities which are produced in family, community, market, and state. And also, how does the mainstream, so my question here is that how does mainstream institutions as these, the 4 institutions I mentioned, work towards gender justice, justice of economy, policy making. So there are lots of laws, policies, constitutions, doing a lot to provide for gender justice after we gain independence, and we have lots of laws, and my previous speaker Ruchiraji also mentioned that. So, and my focus of my talk is going to be on looking at response to gender discrimination and how do we look at gender justice, and what does gender justice entail? Gender justice means different things for different people, and then how do we look at that is something which I wanted to articulate. So bringing together, I was trying to talk about how women's movement has played a role. I mean, Ms. Goswami has already spoken about it, so I'm not going to go in detail, but obviously now that I've worked on it, I'm going to talk very briefly as to how I'm going to connect my presentation of Special Cell to the gender justice topic of today. And women's movement has played a very vital role in bringing this issue of gender and women at the center stage of all eyes, and also interventions by women's groups have played a very important role. So to say that, and also previous speaker also talked about women being the most progressive theme of the decade of the 70s and 80s. And always she talked about the watershed moment. I'm not going to go into that, but yes, the laws have given a lot of outcomes, and but I want to look at these laws into its intervention space. How are they implemented? So gender justice comes by how are you looking at women's sense of justice? And a women's mobilization around the 80s was also around the issue of what you call sexual assault through Mathura, and also about looking at the issue of 498A. Somebody wrote also in the chat about domestic violence and 498A, and also Dowry Prohibition Act, which was almost ineffective at that point of time. And at that point of time in 80s, we talked about incidences of dowry murder, and at that point of time there was a legal change and bringing in 304B for IPC change for dowry murders, and abetment to suicide, where women women died without any of burns, women who hanged themselves, and there were no articulations there was no explanations to these kind of murders and cruelty on women. So in that time, with the advent of IPC Indian Penal Code 498A, we saw that DV became a crime against the state rather than a personal problem. And women's organization created awareness, advocacy for bringing in change in the law and support, and also they played a very vital role, which I want to focus on interventions which helped women survivors to seek counseling, to seek legal aid, and to get shelter. I think women's movement pivotal role was to look at the campaigns, the sensitization through print media and other folk expressions. Like lots of folk songs were evolved, and we all sang those songs, "Ruke na jo, Juke na jo," or "Isliye raha sangharsh ki hum sun chune." Those were the songs at that point of time, and sharing those experiences of violence among the sisterhood really created, an environment of empowering women, and then some dent on the culture of silence at that point of time. Taking ahead, just briefly talking about the other trajectories which the queer feminist articulations took place, and the feminist queer movement talked about sexuality, women's citizen and its sexuality. And I remember I don't know how many of you have looked at, as young students, looked at the issue of fire, and looked at recognition of women's sexual citizenship emerged as a discourse, and how feminist resistance on controversy around film Fire, directed by Deepa Mehta, and the first mainstream Hindi film portrayed lesbianism on the screen. Lesbian love on the screen. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So these are some of the glimpses of that particular times, and then came the articulation on the whole movement of new alliances and solidarities which were being forged within the women's movement, along with the demand on decriminalization of Section 377 in the Indian Penal Code, and that newly emerged. Also, then after that, we see the discourse changing a little bit on looking at contestation around law and citizenship, where Supreme Court looked at the privacy judgment, and the Nelsa judgment came in 14, and the 377 amendments. So this was a day where the judgment was pronounced and people celebrating. At this point of time, newly emerged the sex workers' rights movement and the Dalit feminist assertions as the autonomous political agents, marking their differences with the mainstream women's movement. So they were marking the women's movement, was also getting the articulation of the queer, the sex workers, the Dalits, and this has created a political urgency in the women's movement to look at multiple marginalizations, and thus I see them opening up. We opened up to the way we look at gender equality and gender justice with an intersectional perspective. Yeah. So going on from there, we look at quickly the 2000s now, and I just wanted to bring in the whole discourse of the internet and feminist articulation within the internet, and the non-violent campaigns, like in the 2009, where we had a Pink Chaddi campaign, where we saw women who were attacked for going out to pubs or going out with dating. They were attacked by groups, political groups, and this Pink Chaddi campaign emerged as an online love sena, and it has happened in Mangalore, and then we saw some other articulations of these online, though this online internet based digital activism was bedded by some of the people as armchair activism, and but they really got the issue and dimensions of in the new space in which feminist politics was articulated. So there was Black Noise, Pinjra Tod in Delhi, where they campaigned for reclaiming public spaces. the whole idea of women coming out in public space, why loiter was one of the campaigns. And then also we saw the campaign of Me Too, and hashtag Me Too really opened up a lot of voices as to what was happening in workplaces. What my previous speaker also talked about, that how they did not have a voice, and Me Too gave them a voice. And very briefly, I would want to mention this marriage equality petition, which is still pending, and looking at how how we can still, as adult citizen, decide who it can be our family and who can we can be intimate with. And Supreme Court is still going to wait. I mean, we're going to wait for it. So this was some of the visuals of the pink chutney on the Valentine days, pink chutneys, which was sent to the office of of Mr. Muthu Putham to talk about how women came together and became. So this was Pijra Tod, some of the visuals which gives us a glimpse into what women's movement bring to the area of gender and gender justice. So now moving on, I wanted to talk now, focus on a little bit of interventions and what did these interventions? Okay, I think I have to go back. What did these interventions bring in? So with all this movement happening and mobilization happening, we saw family counseling centers being established across the country by initiative of the Durgabai Deshmukh. And we also saw special cells for women and children in police stations, which I'm going to talk about more because it's our work of the institute. We saw one-stop centers, Sakhi centers are now coming up in districts, still struggling, but we are coming up coming up to help women in a multi-coordinated way. And shelter homes and many other schemes like Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, Ujjwala schemes to trafficked women, and many more. I can go on listing which has come up to, but I'm going to focus on the context of the special cell for women and children in police station, and that's my work. So I wanted to talk about how this particular special cell for women and children, which I'm talking about, which I'm now onwards call it special cell, was established in 1984 as a strategic alliance between the Bombay Police and Tata Institute of Social Sciences. And now, why does this particular initiative become important? Because first of all, it was a strategic alliance with the police system, and we were wanting to harness women who came to the police station. Many times they did not really want the police help. They actually wanted somebody to intervene on their behalf or to tell the man to stop violating her. So a lot of times we saw this this whole issue being the women forcefully reconciled without any. So this is one of the special cells at Dadar police station which the board outside. So the thrust of the special cell which I wanted to come to is this special cell which in the police location is looking at, sorry, the N is missing, sorry guys. Focus on the work on violence against women with a pro-women perspective. So somebody from the police station was looking at her issue. What does she want? Listening to her was very important. And another important thing which was special cells was doing was facilitating spaces for women within the criminal justice system. How to navigate the system? When do I do a non-cognizable diary entry? When can I do an FIR? What are my legal options? What are the other civil laws which can help me? Can PWDVA help me? Can sexual harassment by my neighbor be taken up by the police station? All these were the questions which women came to the police station with. Then also looking at working with individual cases on a daily basis and working with the police system at a structural level was very important to bring women who were coming into the special cells needed both the help of at the individual level casework help and also needed to navigate the system. And basically what we were doing was essentially the cases of crime requiring socio-legal work, which was a potential cases. So we were dealing with large number of potentially they could potentially become 498A or any sexual assault case, but women did not want that, so there were lots of issues which needed to be dealt with. And this was done by 2 full-time trained social workers within the system. So this was started in Mumbai in one special cell at Commissioner of Police Office. So to talk a little bit more about this particular particular program. It was one of the first multi-agency coordinated response on the issue of violence against women, and we saw there was a clear articulation that at the backdrop of power, the social workers were able to clearly say no to violence. The man beating the woman, we were able to clearly say no, and to make also the police see violence as crime. I think this was a very important thing because always it was looked at as a personal issue, and still in many places violence is looked at as a personal issue. 498 are not registered. So the special cell facilitated this space. So when a woman approaches the special cell in the police station, we have police at the backdrop, and we have social workers working in the special cell who work with a pro-women, women-centered approach with all social work skills. That was how it was. And what the special cell social workers could do was to harness various stakeholders, various systems for the woman. So may it be law, free legal aid, DSLA, protection officers, may it be family court, may it be hospital, may it be sending her to shelter home if she required, use of one-stop center, putting her in touch with schemes. We do large number of cases of elderly abuse where we use the elder abuse law, work closely with other NGOs to be the bridge between the police and the women's movement and the women's groups. That was a very important and pivotal role which Special Cell played. So just to move into what was required and what was the key intervention which evolved. Women came to us and told us what they wanted. They wanted their husbands, they wanted their families. Large amount of women wanted their husbands and their families. So in the beginning when we started working, 80% of our cases were of domestic violence and the rest of them were other forms of violence which came to us, including POXO, sexual assault, elderly abuse, same-sex violence, things like that. And the list which we see and you is the kind of work which evolved for the years, last 40 years. We started in 84, this is our 40th year, and we largely provide emotional support and strengthening the woman's psychological self, which is listening to her, helping her understand her options, and helping her to navigate her own support systems and get more support from her natal family and her in-laws family. Engaging police help if she needed. I think that's very important to be a bridge between the woman and the police, because the police usually doesn't entertain women in the first time when she goes with domestic violence. And very important work which happens at the special cell is re-establishing women who don't want to live with their violent partners. They leave peacefully, have mutual separations, and we build their economic assets by building a relationship with her economic assets, by getting her Sridhan back for her. That is a very important work which special cell does. And the most important work with the last point is working with the men in the interest of the violated women. It is important that women say कि मेरे आदमी के साथ बात करो ना, you talk to my husband, उसको समझा, वो समझ जाएगा, मेरे बच्चे हैं, I want to live with I have 2 children, I want to go back to him, I don't have any other place to go. So a lot of times working with men who have been violent to women and creating that space for deeper work, long-term process work is something what Special Cell does. Moving on, I just wanted to show you a milestone as to what have we reached today, so I'll show you in another way. So largely we have been able to develop an approach of indigenous feminist social work practice on violence against women, and I mentioned this is one of the first multi-agency work which is essential to work with different agencies to come together to understand the woman's sense of justice, what the woman wants. Yeah, and so we work with large amount of community of domestic violence, child and early marriages, sexual assault, sexual and religious minorities, cases from there, trafficking, prostitution, and violence against women within the context of age, so elderly abuse, disability, class and caste. So just to give you a glimpse of what the special cell approach is, today the Maharashtra special cells, from one special cell we have grown into a government scheme of Maharashtra and having 144 special cells up to block level. Yeah, so we began as an experiment, as a pilot, And then we grew it over the years. We became 20, we became 40 at every district, and now we are at block level. And we have, over a period of time now, since 2019, we have handled more than 1 lakh cases. So this is the kind of a trajectory of a growth of a program from a pilot at one space at the Commissioner office to today a government program and a government scheme completely funded by the Department of Women and Child with the Home Department. So this is the Maharashtra scene. Now I will take you to other efforts. This has been a very scalable model. So you giving justice to one woman at one special cell at the Commissioner office was not enough. We had to have a scalable model where we work with thousands of women and we found that special cell was one of the scalability. It was a scalability leveraging government support and infrastructure. We were able to mobilize government funding after the pilot demonstration and became a government scheme once taken over. So like in Maharashtra, we were able to do this in several states. In Maharashtra, we have scaled up to 127 functioning special cell, and we are right now having 602 special cells across the country. So Haryana also developed special cells. So if I talk about institutionalization of special cells in Haryana, today Haryana has got a clear articulation of the special cell has a clear mandate under the PWDVA Act and the PCMA Act. So which has been a very important, every state which adapted the model of special cell evolved their own approach and evolved their own model. So in Haryana, the model was with activating two important acts so that they could give justice and stop child marriages. In the first year of starting in 2009, we stopped 500 child marriages and put the link them into with education and back to school. So institutionalization in Rajasthan, women's groups were in a big way. We started with 11 in Vishakha. With the help of Vishakha, we started 11 special cells. And today, Rajasthan has got 242 blocks, special cell at every block and supported by Rajasthan government. The same happened in Gujarat story in 2013. We began with 5 special cells which were Oxfam supported and with women's groups. And today they have presence in 65 locations and 15 plus are being added as we talk. So in Delhi we started with 2 pilot NCW plus. NCW supported the pilots, and today we have 14 special cells in Delhi, and we had also a round the clock model which shut down in during COVID. So we look at the kind of coverage. The coverage of huge amount of women have had a footfall, and recently we have started the special cell model in Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. So every district of Jammu now has a special cell since last 2 years, and even Ladakh we have a special cell in Kargil and in Leh, which has been a very path-breaking work because at that altitude and that height and that geography and that sparse population, we have been able to have women coming in 3 years. Ladakh did not even have 5 registered cases in the OSC. After the special cell started, we have now got 50. So you can imagine what's the situation like. We also have special cell in Bihar. We piloted in Orissa. Things like that. So I can go on, but today currently we have 602 special cells across India. Okay, so moving on, I wanted to talk about how the gender justice through, I talked about the Haryana model of looking at implementation of PWDVA and the Child Marriage Prohibition Act, and I think this was a very important act which came in 2006. Since IPC 498A was made toothless, they were wanting to have 498AB. Men were up in arms because they thought that women are misusing 498A. But actually, if you go to see, the 498A has been underutilized and there is no misuse at all. And I can take you further to the journey of PWDVA, where the relief and protection given by PWDVA was one of the vital things which the women's movement were able to bring in. And first time in the history of first time in the history, we were able to see civil society organization were part of the, they had a role in the act, in the PWDB Act as service provider. And also a role of a social worker or a legal expert as a role of a protection officer, which was built into the act. So I think this was a step, this law brought us a little bit closer to bringing the women to be able to use this law in a better way. I'm going to talk about very briefly about a small research which I conducted, not a small, a 4-stage research which I conducted in Haryana, in 2 districts, Maharashtra in 2 districts, Odisha in 2 districts, and Tamil Nadu. Totally, I looked at the secondary data of PWDVA filed cases of 2,466, and we interviewed 545 stakeholders and women who filed or worked with the PWDVA system. And I think it was a high-opening research for me as a researcher, because I'm going to share with you what kind of women came to the who use the PWDVA Act. This is the data of the court, which says that women were burned in 110 occasions. Women were battering children, violence during pregnancy, causing miscarriage in 72 occasions, dowry harassment in 1,760 cases, and so on. And the kind of violences was so high. But if you look at the next slide, where I'm looking at court responses and the data, which actually gives you a disaggregated picture, if you look at it, only 644 cases of the 2066 were granted fully reliefs or partly reliefs. The relief, that is the protection order, the residence order, and so forth, a custody order or maintenance order. 1,256 cases were pending. So what I'm trying to show to the audience is that even
বাস হ্যাং করেছে এখন ওর তো শুনতে
right hand side, you can see the first column says it fully and partially granted. Only 160 women actually got the order out of the 2,466, and only, that is 6% of the total population got. Otherwise they were rejected, dismissed, withdrawn because of various reasons, because women were tired, because it went on, and disposed due to
হ্যাং করছে বারবার
646. So you see that the timeline below, that 2006 to 2013, there was no relief for women, and women were just having pending cases after pending cases for years, which was the law which had promised us justice within 6 months.
Javeri,
Yeah, within
Professor Panchal, can you finish within 2-3 minutes so we can go to the question?
Sure.
Okay.
Can I just show some slides quickly?
Sure.
Equality.
Sure.
A little bit. Equality is something which we are okay. I think let's just stop it, and I'll just talk about my challenges at the end, and I can. So what we are facing today with justice is. Ma'am, can I take 2 minutes?
Sure, go ahead. Your side is hanging, I think. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So I have a slide here which shows that today the situation of women is burdened. Life is very tough for everybody. Affirmative action create a level playing field for all, and that is what women also require, equal opportunity, and we need to have specific needs to be catered to, and to be able to reach the obligation of CEDAW, which talks about equality and women's human rights. And finally, I wanted to say that struggles to find justice still continue. It's very important to understand that justice cannot be without care. There are 2 pillars which need to take care of justice and care together. We need to break binaries of public, private. We need to look at the analytical tool of patriarchy, sexual division of labor, sex, gender, power relations, and intersectionality, and that is what the women's movement has got us. strategies of law reforms and has to be followed with services and awareness programs. Because only law reforms cannot give us enough. And I see that today the state is appropriating the language of women's movement, which is empowerment. So I think that is important. I think this is my last slide, that still today we need to work with judiciary, because this is the last bastion that nobody addresses. We have not really addressed the last bastion, the judiciary. And also there needs to be, the state needs to be prepared to get civil society groups and organizations engaged with them in any models which they want. And I think budgets for services are limited, which needs to be brought in. And instead of reinventing the wheel, the government should look at what are the positive models. And the cultures are changing. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Panchal. One thing is true, before I give it to Devasri, that neither the left government nor the TMC government, and if we get in future some other Ram government, has done anything in Eastern India. There is no special cell in the eastern side. But North India, which we think we are culturally better than UP, Gujarat, Rajasthan, they have special cells. Anyway, I'm introducing our Dean of Law and Professor of Law, who will get the main question, starts the main question, and then we go for Q&A.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you to both the speakers for this enlightening talks on gender justice in India. Before I ask any question, I ask myself a question: how long are we going to act such hypocritically? Because on one side we have laws, and on the other side we do not take the initiative to go for a proper implementation of the laws. I'll just give you one small example. We do have a law, Indecent Representation of Women Prohibition Act 1986, and we objectify women in films. Even if I say that a woman's right of self-determination needs to be approached in a more respectable way, are we actually trying to do so when we talk about the state? Does the state really want gender justice to be implemented in the country? I pose this question because if we look at the Constitution, in the articles that have been mentioned by Professor Buddha Bhadra and the other speakers too, it talks about coming out with state initiating measures to prevent discrimination on the ground of sex, not on gender. Maybe that is the reason we are not focusing on gender, say, discriminations that are going on. I am not looking only as women as part of the gender discussion, but I'm also talking of other groups in this question. And I would like to ask this question to both my speakers. To what extent do you think that the right of self-determination amongst women will help us in resolving these issues related to gender violence or gender discrimination that we are finding today so blatantly visible across the country?
Can I just add on to what Devasri had said?
Okay, sure. This is our Dean of School of Social Sciences.
Yeah. So I'm very privileged to speak here in this workshop. One of the reasons being Ruchira is there, and when she was an undergraduate student, I taught her. And then we worked together as colleagues. And so what I am to say will be resonating with Ruchira. You are looking at a person who I suppose must have been the only... You can't hear? Now can you hear me? Professor Panchal, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm trying very hard.
All right, okay, thank you very much. Right, trying is important. Yeah, so I am perhaps the only official in the university administration in West Bengal till date that I know of who implemented the Vishaka guidelines without fear or favor. I was told when I brought in the case that I should not proceed. And I told my Vice Chancellor that I will. And that the law is very clear. And I also said that the lady who was harassed, I checked it out. I found that she had 101 emails sent to her, soliciting her. And that was good enough for me. I called the lady's husband and I said that this is what has happened. Because there were rumors, as Ruchira pointed out, that, oh yes, they were very good friends and therefore, the lady is just bringing in this. So I asked him in front of her, what is being done to her at the workplace. I'm not going to go into the details.
No, she cannot hear, that's what.
Sorry then, but this needs to be said. So, at the time, I convinced myself and I proceeded. And we went by the book. The ICC was formed. The ICC was empowered. I stepped back and allowed the ICC to take over. We had people in the Executive Council, like secretaries of the government, ministers, monitoring. And the interesting story is that no one supported me. And one of the most important thing that I found out, forget what happens to me. That's a long story and I'll maybe give a seminar on that later on. But you said hypocrisy, and that is where I come in. The hypocrisy is blatant. Women did not stand up for that lady. It took me 7 years to prove that she was discriminated against. And no one had the guts. Let us talk about guts first. Theories later. Do you have the guts to stand up and say that this is right? You can have laws, and I'm sorry, laws means nothing. Means nothing. South Africa had laws which said apartheid is good. So, before we talk about laws, an ICC, which is now dysfunctional anyway, the other thing that I have an observation, they're not questions, they're observations. For a person who's gone through this trauma of trying to implement this in good faith, and I still have the evidence with me. So, the point that I'm trying to make is, because I thought I'll let it go, it's too traumatic to talk about. And then there was, it triggered me by saying the hypocrisy. So I've always been struck by hypocrisy of people. And this is one of the best examples of hypocrisy that I've faced in my working career. That here was a bunch of people who were supposedly committed to equality before the law. Forget your articles. And I saw day in and day out how the subversion took place. Yes, Muladi?
I'm saying that just to limit it so that...
No, I'm quite sure that this can go on and on. But I just wanted to make a point that beyond the law, there is something called will and your personal morality and public ethics involved. And are you ready to stand up for that? And that is not what we are talking about. When we're just leaving all that to the law.
I am ready and I will stand up for that.
No, that is over.
I can only talk about myself, not
Yeah,
anybody else.
yes.
I don't have the right to.
Yeah, but that is very important in the workshop. Yeah. Yes.
I'm sorry. What I am going to relate are 2 points raised, that in the eastern region we don't have a special cell, which is true. However, I had a little experience in at least 3 universities where I happened to be working. First one was Jadavpur, where there was a particular case, and it had to be resolved. What is being called, spoken about as hypocrisy can be overcome if there is a willingness on the part of those who are supposed to act, are ready to act. I'll give you a very small example of that. There was this particular case of a professor involved in a kind of a very obnoxious act against one of the lady teachers, and there was a furore in the campus as usual, and I was almost a rookie presence in the university, and I saw there was a lot of confusion. So I had to take a small step in going over to my vice chancellor and tell him that, you know, I had a position. So I told him that, why don't you appoint me as a one-person committee member to investigate the preliminaries so that the charges can be framed. Because, you know, the University Act requires that there are specific steps to be taken. And there's a long story, but eventually things could be taken to the point where the professor could be found guilty. So my contention would be that fundamentally the awareness amongst people and those who happen to hold positions, they have to start acting as part of the act of the university. You know, the problem occurs when some of these people start pussyfooting about all these issues. So, for me, the take-home point is, from my later on experiences as well, is that somewhere around this kind of things needs to be repeatedly told, because quite often what is being called about hypocrisy is basically a skin-deep understanding of what should be the norms in the society. You know, I mean, right now, at least in 200 campuses across the USA, there's a protest going on, and the problem in the United States perhaps is that people there in the authority are afraid to call Israel as an apartheid society. So, unless we are clear about the terms to be used and the way the law is to be used, you know, you can have different laws, but at the end of the day, implementation depends on people who are associated with it, and unless we can reach that, I don't think that we agree. Sorry.
I think she's off. She cannot hear. Now, Ruchira,
I think I'd just like to add a caveat to this. We spoke about hypocrisy, but hypocrisy itself is also a function of the power matrix.
আমি একটা কথা বলি I have a question, in fact. I have noticed that the work participation rate for the female is very low in India. Recently, from 2017 on, according to the data of the periodic labor force survey, it is increasing. Female labor participation rate. Now, if the participation rate for the female increases, do you think that the question of all these things, harassment and all that, will decline or increase? This is my question. Could you get my point?
If I may respond to the question, female, we talk about this in all sectors, which is the entry of women into workplace has to reach a critical mass. Because unless you reach the critical mass, you will not be able to change the power dynamics.
This is my understanding.
So, one is increase of women in all kinds of workplace. But if it's an organization of 30 men and 2 women, then 2 women will continuously comply with the male standards set in the organization, right? Say for example, engineering,
policing, etc. Women will emulate men till you break that and you reach the critical mass. And that is when ethics of the workplace starts shifting. But before ethics can shift, that conflict has to happen. I mean, I don't know if I'm using clearly a critical point of view. Without that conflict, it will not change. So that, I'm not calling it class.
Participation rate is not increasing for women.
এইটা তো টপিক না
Whole lot of other, but
এইটা তো আজকে টপিক না আমরা আরেকদিন করব না আজকে টপিক জাস্টিস
Whole issue lies there.
No, not necessarily.
If the
Not necessarily. Where the husband and wife both work, even if they are, আপনাকে তাহলে 19 এপ্রিলটা মনে করিয়ে দিতে হয় আপনাকে আরো অনেক কিছু মনে করাতে হয় না না
I think
if both of the husband and wife work, then equality exists. That's a dream. Pipe dream. It's a pipe dream.
Can I
That's a
just come in?
male-dominated society.
It's just
Yeah, but male dominated society এলো কোথা থেকে? আপনাকে তো আসে? No, over the years historically developed করেছে। এবং upper two classes, not the lower classes.
ছিল না
The
তো
work
ইজিপ্টে তো
participation
ছিল
rate for women.
অনেক জায়গায় ছিল না পৃথিবীর প্রথমে কোথাও ছিল না কোথাও ছিল না পৃথিবীর প্রথমে সিভিলাইজেশনের শুরুতে কোথাও ছিল না
If I may add to what you have said, Ruchira Madam.
To work
আচ্ছা
participation
তুমি উত্তর
rate
দেবে
বাড়ান।
আর উত্তর দেবে
না শুধু আমি একটা জিনিস বলছি, just not work participation, but also where are they in that power dynamics, right? I mean, for any formal space, which might be women dominated in terms of numbers, education is one that space, tons of women, right? But they will be the occupying the lowest rungs of the administration.
That is also an issue.
So it's not just participation, but also, I would say,
Quality of
patriarchy and economy.
এইবার আসল জায়গায় আসি not just participation as clerks, as assistants, as etc., but as dean, as professor, as vice chancellor, pro vice chancellors, registrars, etc., 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 power holder. আমি জানি আমি যে ইউনিভার্সিটিতে প্রথম জয়েন করেছি বিদ্যাসাগর ইউনিভার্সিটি there was the vice chancellor Manoj Chattopadhyay who died happily, so আমি বলতে পারি এখন so he asked me that why have you applied for the post, because you already have a lectureship, that time it is called lectureship, and your husband has a professorship, so why do you need to apply for next higher post? We can take a man who needs to support the family, we can take that. I answered then, that was 1987, 89, sorry, I answered to him, sir, for this, because that time the Vishaka guideline did not come into existence, but Vishaka did happen. Sir, this is a very derogatory statement. Question is, do I have the required qualification to apply for the higher post or not? Why do you consider me as male or a female? What do you think that the females do not support their families? Then you don't know about agricultural field at all. They support and earn more, actually. And Manoj Chattopadhyay told that you are not going to get any higher post here as long as I am there. I am there. And so I left in 1989 from lectureship to Kolkata, understanding that these guys will never give me higher post. And we are talking about one. There were 31 male professors and one woman professor, that was me. I had no toilet. That is how it is there. Don't go to the, that didn't happen. 1977 left came into power. In mechanical engineering department up to 1997, there was no female toilet, women's toilet. কাউকে glorify করার কোনো ব্যাপার নেই as far as women's position is concerned. Everybody is a Ravon when they have the power. I'm sorry, I'm contesting it and challenging it, because that is exactly how it happened. Here also, all the higher posts are now decorated by men, even at SNU. And numbers, you count numbers of assistant, you count numbers of assistant professors, they are all female. Now,
Just to add, just to add to what
Javeri, can you hear?
Yes, I can hear, but I'm not saying the sync.
Yeah, you want to say.
But I agree with you that women need to be having the seat of power. Otherwise, we are only occupying the lower rungs.
Anything else you want to say? Because we're really feeling bad.
I also wanted to respond to one of the questions on self-determination.
yes.
So the student, somebody asked in the audience that how important is the woman's self-determination, if I understand the question right?
Yes.
And my answer to that is that woman is an expert on her own life. So her self-determination is paramount. Without that, any intervention, any kind of justice will fall flat, because she is the one who will decide what is the right intervention, right path, right law for her. So we might think that she is being battered so badly, why does she want to reconcile? But she wants to reconcile, and we'll have to do that. And we do have a non-violent reconciliation. So I think self-determination is paramount in any intervention process.
Thank you, Ravi.
Thank you. Thank you.
He's trying for a long time. So, Mollika get a chance now.
No, I just wanted to add, along with Professor Ruchira, that it's not only the critical mass that is required, but women should be put in the position of decision making. It's only when that happens we can think about a change.
We should not have somebody on our head always thinking that we are inferior, we cannot take right decisions. That has been happening for the last 3,000 years or so. 1,000 year marking, because that was the earliest civilization.
Because some women are also not believing that we can.
Some women, most women don't believe. They can say, most women think, no, I am poor, I really don't know, this is the boss. So if somebody can tell me that at the age of 71, I should change my skin because I would look good, I consider that sexual harassment.
Basic question, madam.
Basic
Why the work participation rate for the female is so low?
I'll give you 3 reasons.
That is the question.
Okay, let me try to give you 3 reasons. First reason.
And then if we have democracy, then power will automatically come.
Power will automatically come. Power has to have a bloodbath.
No.
A violent bloodbath. বললে কি করে হবে রতনদা, এটা বললে হবে না। আপনার এই প্রশ্নের 3টে উত্তর দিচ্ছি। ওয়ার্ক পার্টিসিপেশন এক, ফার্স্ট না না 3টে রিজনস দিচ্ছি, 3টে রিজন।
কাটা উত্তরটা দেবে তো why the why the work participation
আমি 3টে রিজনস দিচ্ছি, হাজারো রিজন আছে, 3টে দিচ্ছি। ক্লাস ওয়াইজ দিয়ে দিই, intersectionally, তাহলে বোধহয় বেটার হবে। upper class thinks whatever women does, they need to be married, and marriage is the first duty. The marital bliss is everything they must have. Middle class thinks now that okay, marriage has to be there, but my daughter should be educated enough, if need be she can follow. These are optional things. If you have 2 children in house, আমি আপনাকে আর্টিকেল পাঠিয়ে দিতে রাজি হচ্ছি, আপনি নিচ্ছেন না। If there are 2 children, if there are 2 children, one brother and a girl, the brother goes to the English medium school and the girl goes to the Bengali medium, because English medium is very high cost, parents cannot afford. And how do we LIC against একটা মামলা হয়েছিল? Keep your money for your daughter's marriage and for your son's education. The মামলা করেছিল women's organization. এটা আবার কি কথা? Daughter's marriage and son's education, daughter's marriage, son's education, son's marriage নিয়ে which will come from the daughter's dowry. এই কথা
কিন্তু আপনার প্রশ্নের উত্তর হবে।
আরে আমি তো ওয়ার্ক করতে আসতে দেয় না। আচ্ছা বেশ, আপনাকে সায়েন্টিস্টদের আমি একটা লাইন উত্তর দিচ্ছি। 37% women scientists do PhD.
সৌদি আরবিয়া
সৌদি আরবিয়া না, ইন্ডিয়া বলুন। আমি ইন্ডিয়া বলছি। 37% সায়েন্স PhD করে, আর 15% অ্যাবজর্ব করে।
আমি যে হাতটা তুলে রাখলাম কি 2 হাত তুলবে এবার?
এখনো চান্স পায়।
I was just very enamored with both presentations, so thank you, Dr. Bhodro, for getting these two very luminary scholars today for the workshop. I was very interested in the notion of hypocrisy, but it's needless to say even that is placed within the matrix of power, because there's selective opportunism. Some people would like to take on certain cases, but at the same time, we just spoke about decision making. And unfortunately, I'm reminded of Justice Shama Joshi, if I've got her name correct, who gave very controversial judgments. One was the Tehelka Tarun Tejpal case, and this is where you could bring in your idea of how a woman's social life and sociability almost becomes a source of anxiety for a very patriarchal society, that who was she mixing with, why was she so close to Mr. Tejpal, and so on and so forth. And also a very controversial POXO case, right? So if it's not, it's on top of a garment, it is not considered molestation, and you know the entire,
রূপান বাজাজ কেস,
all of that. Yeah. So we also need to qualify that women not only need to be decision makers, but we also need to select women who come from a culture of empathy and politics, the politics to which they adhere to. Shama Joshi, we know which particular colored wing she belongs to, right? So I think that's also something we need to, encapsulate within our sensitization. We cannot just randomly pick and choose. Yeah.
only docile and passive women are elected, most of the time.
let us hear
অরুণদাকে প্রশ্ন না করতে দিলে অরুণদা আমি উল্টো অফিসের উল্টো দিকে ঘর কেলেঙ্কারি হয়ে যেতে পারে। বলুন।
What is the question?
হ্যাঁ, পেছনে আরেকজন আছে।
I do agree that women should be in the, the concentration of the women community should be there more than the male. How does it affect? How does it help? How does it help? I know of cases in which, in concentration of, suppose the number of women workers in a particular place, in a professional particular place, whatever it is, whatever is the status of the society, they work in school, colleges, universities, administration, wherever. How does it help the women? The question that
If the percentage of women increases, how does it help?
doesn't help. Doesn't help because if you have a director or a vice chancellor or an administrator lady, what happens to that? What happens? I have experienced lady vice chancellors. I have Madam, it's my turn. It's my turn. Lady directors, lady vice chancellors, I heard from my friends all over India that wherever there is a lady administrator,
Horrible.
it's horrible. He said that.
আমি জানি না হাতটা অসুবিধার উঠেছে আমার।
He said horrible. I didn't say that. I didn't say horrible. Okay. What is the background story? What is the background story? If it is a personal one, you said that, okay. If it is something which is important for a particular person, that there is a personal background, and I will be tough to my colleagues, be it male or female. I do not think this is the right for a particular person to be in the leadership. Wait, no, for any person. I'll give you other examples. Please wait, madam. I'll give you examples. I know of a director, this is my personal experience. I know of a director of the institute who advised me, whenever this lady scientist gets into the room, just open the door or ask your secretary to come over. Because he used to do that. Whenever that lady scientist used to the director's room, he would call his secretary, lady, asking for the file, which is very urgent, he has to go through it right away. Why is that? The lady was the dangerous person to any male person. Director was advising me that, and I accepted the advice. For good reasons, I accepted the advice. না না অসুবিধা যত হাতেই তুলুক না কেন হাতটা তুলতে দেওয়া হবে না, আমি পাঠিয়ে যাচ্ছি, না হবে না। অসুবিধা যে কী বলবো আমি জানি না, ছেড়ে দিই, আমার কথাটা শুনতে হবে আপনাদের। This is the second example. My conclusion after all these years, more than 30 years of work in the different places, university or research institutions, my experience told me that it doesn't matter whether you are a male or a female at the top or not. It really matters what kind of person you are. Thank you, madam. I'm खुश हूँ.
From now on,
Okay.
not a woman professor, but just the professor. Not a woman this, not a lady that, just that. We want vice chancellor irrespective of gender, just the best person. Have we done that? 3% vice chancellors have been given.
আমি একটা হাতে মাইক নিয়ে দুটো হাতে তুলতে পারবো না ম্যাডাম, আমি একটা হাতে তুললাম, দুবার করে তুলছি। আমার বাবা আপনি আচ্ছা শুনুন ঘটনা শুনতে পাচ্ছেন না তো? কাজে সবাই বাংলা বুঝি না, শুনতে পাচ্ছেন বাংলা বুঝি না।
হলেই ঠিক হয়, বুঝলে, আর কিছু লাগে না।
আচ্ছা কি দরকার, কেন বলার তো কিছু
She's hearing.
Sure. This is exactly what I feel. It's a question of a person who's leading.
Speak in English. হাতটা একটু সরিয়ে
হাতটা সরিয়ে
একটু সরিয়ে না।
It's a question of how you handle a situation. আপনি শুনুন আমার কথাটা, আপনি শুনুন, আমি আপনাকে রিয়েক্ট করে বেশি বলছি, কারণ আপনি শুনলে সবাই শুনতে পাবে, কারণ আপনি শুনলে সবাইকে বলতে পারবেন, তো সেই জন্য আপনি কোঅর্ডিনেট করছেন তাই। If you do that, I am also going to tell you of some person who used to listen to everybody, lady or male or female colleagues, but at the same time he used to solve the problem the way it demands. But I know the internal committee for doing this. I sat in such committees for the institutions, a semi-run committee, or in a committee with other persons, where such questions came up, whether the person is right or wrong, whether the professor has doing it right to the lady student or not. These are very sensitive issues, and one has to be very, very careful in designing this. No law, no written equation can help them. You have to understand that with the great humanity, whether the professor has been ditched by the student. There are cases, I won't be able to cite that here. I know of cases in which a younger person taking full advantage of the administrator, after the ambition is fulfilled, she went back to the still higher authority and complained about the person.
That happens.
So that happens. How can you solve this problem with laws and equations on the board? You cannot. One has to be really, really just to your own. You should be able to analyze the cases. Each and every case may be different. You have to analyze it that way, and you need to tell people, to ask your conscience, without taking side to any person, any side, without taking side of anybody here, your dear ones or non-dear ones. Analyze them and then do it. Then only one can solve this problem. There is no question that equality is definitely gender bias. There shouldn't be any gender bias or anything. There is only one thing the ladies can do, they can be mothers. There is only one thing the gents can do, they can be fathers. There is no alternative to this.
There is. you just go to the sperm bank, inject the sperm bank, and then without a father you get a baby. We don't need anymore.
আমি বলেছি যে একটি পুরুষ মানুষের বাবা হওয়ার ক্ষমতা আছে, একটি মহিলা মা হওয়ার ক্ষমতা আছে, দ্যাটস অল। এই ছাড়া আমি কোনো ডিফারেন্স দেখতে পাই না। আর দে আর অল ইকুয়াল। দেড় কোথা থেকে কোথায় নিয়ে যাচ্ছেন আপনি?
আপনি তো ছেলেকে বাবা বানাচ্ছেন, মেয়েকে মা, তার মানে কি বায়োলজি? I'm talking social.
আমি কিছুই বলছি না, আমি বলছি বায়োলজিক্যালি একজন পুরুষ সে বাবা হতে পারে, সে পুরুষ এবং বাবা হতে পারে।
সে বায়োলজিক্যালি পুরুষ হতে পারে, স্পার্ম ডোনার হতে পারে। বাবা হওয়া অন্য জিনিস, বাবা ইজ সোশ্যাল।
আরে আপনি তো অন্যভাবে চলে গেলেন। এই জন্য এই দুটো বিষয় নিয়ে আপনার মাস্টারমশাইকে সামলান। প্রায়শই ডাইগ্রেস করে যাচ্ছেন। হ্যাঁ,
ওকে এবার একটু বলবো, কারণ ও বেচারা ওখানে বসেছে, বলেও পারছে না। আমি তো সব মা বাবা মানি।
এটা অনেকক্ষণ চলছে।
চলাবে তো ভালোই। আপনাদের খাদ্য দেবো না।
জেন্ডার বায়াসটা তুলবেন না, জেন্ডার কোনো বায়াস
বাবা বানাবে না, মেয়েকে মা।
Well, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much to both speakers for a very comprehensive and incisive talk about what we understand as, special cases and special interactions of the law with gender specifically and sex as well in that sense. I study for my PhD and my other research, published research, I have studied mediations of identity, of which I focus specifically on agency and consent. And these have been kind of the gamuts of things that I understand the socialization of gender and the biology of sex, right? I do not want to get into the other stuff today that we've talked about, which has been wonderful. And I am assistant professor, so I'm female presenting as well, so I keep that in mind. But what I wondered is, both of our speakers today presented cases, and I am not, clearly not a legal scholar by any means. I am a media studies scholar. And so this is the kind of difference of criticality that I come at this with. And I was curious, why is it that neither of you, as you explained legality, mentioned the word consent? And I wondered, how is that enacted? I understand that legal definitions of consent exist, but why is it that neither of you have talked about consent? You skirt around it, both of you skirted around it and said many things, and I understand consent as a definition of an absence. When there is no consent, we understand consent, right? And so I wondered, again, if you could comment on creating a special cell based on consent, creating workplace harassment based on consent.
Javali, have you heard the question?
I could understand, I just could understand cis women, I don't know what she's saying.
No, okay. Then let Ruchira answer, because do you want to reply to her?
How special cells built in the build or
Yeah, Ruchira can answer, I am okay.
No, you go ahead. I don't think she understood, she heard me.
You want to repeat in one sentence?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. Ma'am, can you hear me right now?
Can you hear her right now?
Actually, the best is for you to put a microphone there. Or rather the laptop.
Why don't you go over there and speak into that
Should I,
mic?
do you mind if I
Yeah.
reach over
I
you?
don't mind at all. You come. Speak into this microphone. Actually, women
Hello,
are
ma'am.
told to speak in soft voices.
Hello, ma'am. Could you hear me now?
Speak louder.
Louder, please.
Hello, ma'am. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you for a wonderful talk. I was very curious as to why, at any point of time, neither of our speakers have been able to utter the word consent. And I wondered, what in legality would you mind commenting in terms of why that is a word that you did not use, whether that is for the construction of special cells, whether that is in construction of legality of workplace harassment? Where does consent as a definition lie, and why was it not used?
So, I'm still not very clear on the question. Is it about consent?
Yes.
Okay.
Why neither?
This gender, so I couldn't understand.
No. Why neither of us mentioned consent as a crucial concept in the laws that we were discussing. For you,
I skipped the slide on Mathura rape case where the definition of consent was actually talked about in the 1970s, and consent has been was defined. So I think probably you can talk about it, Ms. Goswami.
Yeah. Consent was taken out after that.
So quick responses on my part, which is if we are looking at the sexual harassment, prevention of sexual harassment at workplace law, within the black letter law, the word consent is not mentioned. It is kind of implied when it says unwelcome, right? So that's the word that is there in the law. So it clearly mentions the word unwelcome, right? Which would mean lack of consent that is the word that is in use. Second is that this Indian laws around gender justice has crucially talked about consent, right? And what you said in the sense of lack of consent. So rape is lack of consent. So it is in the 1980s Mathura rape case and that changed the law where consent was brought in, talked about, a distinction made between will and consent and all of that. So a whole lot of other legislations are premised on the presence or absence of consent, but for each of these legislations, they are using another term. For example, sexual harassment uses unwelcome. That is the word consent. But now I think if we had discussed sexual assault or rape laws, I think I would have been able to articulate that more on how we move from no consent to bringing in consent to from an explicit no to an explicit yes. That is where the law is now posed, but that is more a discussion that is happening vis-a-vis the rape law. I think that is it. In sexual harassment also, you can bring that in. But is there an explicit yes? If not, then it's a no.
Yes, that's why I the idea, like if there is absence, we understand that
No,
no consent.
No, there is one point needed there. One more point. This is the very crucial moment because in India is one of the countries where we don't have marital rape. But in roundabout way, in 2005 domestic violence, it has been told that if the husband forces the wife, it will be considered violence. So that's the back door. But there is no marital rape. But that's coerced consent on the part of the husband to sexually satisfy him is criminal. So India is a country where you don't talk straight. You talk straight, you have a problem. So we don't talk straight that marital rape is rape. But we have done it in a back door that those who will complain, then only it will come. But that creates a tremendous vacuum. Those women who are not married but coerced into that kind of relationship have no law for them. Only sexual harassment at workplace. Suppose she is not in any workplace. Suppose she is in the field, open field, and she is coerced. Like date rape is not there. Ruchira actually said, the guy knew the girl. So guy knew doesn't mean that the guy can impose on her. We don't have that kind of provisions. But date rape is all in European and American laws that date rape is possible. You may know the guy, but you do not allow the guy to have sexual relation. It's not meaning that if you know the person as a romantic one, that sexual relation is necessary. But in India, that part is not there. So that's one of the very big lacuna
we have in the domestic violence 2005, even in POSH 2013, and the amendment which is being considered in POSH 2024, that is not discussed. And no women's organization also have asked for this. The marital rape and non-marital rape. Well, date rape. Date rape. If you know somebody, then he has a right to jump on me if I don't want.
They try to define marital rape as a grey area, but consent is not a grey area, which actually needs to be...
No, marital rape is not a grey area.
It's not a grey area for us, but the legal system would like to encode it.
That means legal system is male biased. This is a clear masculine patriarchal position. Rape is a rape. Whether my husband does against my will is a rape or somebody else does. That has to be the clear lining. You know, that is why women are not called full individuals in India. আমার স্বামী বলেছে তো কি হয়েছে স্বামী কি দেবতা নাকি
স্বামী নামটাই তো is
স্বামী তো প্রভু স্বামী মানে প্রভু স্বামী ছিল ওনারশিপ সত্য
husband, স্বামী.
হ্যাঁ না মা না 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 এর প্রশ্ন আছে হ্যাঁ কি বললেন
এজ অফ কনসেন্ট বলে একটা ব্যাপার
হ্যাঁ ছিল 2000 কলোনিয়াল পিরিয়ডে 8 থেকে 12 হ্যাঁ এজ অফ কনসেন্ট বিল কন্ট্রোভার্সি 8 থেকে 12 তে এসেছিল হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ
এর উপরে খুব বড় একটা
হ্যাঁ না না প্রচুর কাজ আছে এজ অফ কনসেন্ট বিল কন্ট্রোভার্সি ওয়াজ এ ভেরি বিগ কন্ট্রোভার্সি হ্যাঁ কনসেন্ট বিল 8 10 12 অবধি গেছে তারপরে আমরা ওটাকে 18 তে এনেছি এখন এটাকে 21 এনেছি কিন্তু এইটা যায়নি যে
কনসেন্ট মানেটা কি
হ্যাঁ এজ অফ কনসেন্ট মানে আপনি কি are you qualified to give a consent or not do you understand at the age of 8 or 10 or 12
age of consent for sexual intercourse
yes not only that marriage also age of consent bill was about marriage age
marriage implies
but the implication at that point of
marriage implies sexual relations that's the problematic part that's the third gender then goes out of the binary judiciary. Then the binary judicial system does not consider the third gender, which is recognized in India in order as citizen because they can vote. লাগবে তো গুড আড্ডা বৈঠক না এটা উইমেন ডেভেলপমেন্ট সেল আমরা কনসিয়াসনেস রেজ করছি অ্যাওয়ারনেস লাগবে তো খুব ভালো কথা অয়ন বিরক্ত হবে না এবার গানটা না 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 এই চাঁদনি 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 ওরে বাবা চাঁদনি
আমি একটা প্রশ্ন করতে চাই প্রথমত স্যারকে বলবো স্যার there is a lot of
not in
yeah of course there is a lot of sexual intercourse which happens let's say in the Indian society outside marriage among young people that was the topic of my thesis so a lot of rape cases are filed যেখানে it's very difficult to prove that it was a prima facie rape case. So the social reality is that younger and younger people are getting sexually active. So here we see there is a disjunct between society and law, where the age of consent is a very problematic concept. So that would be my response to you. We can have another Adda Boitak on that, as sir said. We need another Adda Boitak. Sorry, sir?
SNU male জনতাকে করতে
Can't hear you, sir.
would be sexually liberated.
We need healthy and safe sexuality, sir. That is the need in India, especially because it's a rape culture society. Right? So I would like to ask my question to both my speakers. Yeah. So both my speakers then...
from Draupadi onwards.
So we are talking about gender justice, so then the basis of that is violence, right? We are talking about violence against women and, violence against any person. So I would say, I would kind of agree with Trupti where she said that the measures has to be non-violent, right? And the representation of violence that we are seeing on, let's say, the OTT platforms now and in the big screen also, that there is a sexualization of violence and there is also a standardization and normalization of violence and also of self-defense, as if we don't know where the line is and all of that. That is becoming the gray area and all of that. So I would like to ask this to both my speakers then, right? Like, what can we do at the societal level
because we are also critiquing the legal system a lot, right? So what could be the response as a society, and especially because we are doing this inside the university then. You know, as teaching courses, what kind of courses can we offer so that it comes as an antidote? Like for example, right now this semester we are teaching a course, I'm doing a course along with another course teacher on sociology of love, intimacy and friendship, where we are also talking about violence, but comes in as an antidote, right? So I would like to ask both of you, what could be our responses as teachers as well within the university space to address such violence? Thank you.
Javeri, you first.
Oh, okay. I mean, I think it's a very important question you're asking. I think Chandni is asking, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's a. I think we. I would not throw the baby with the bathwater. I think laws are very, very important. I work with the law all the time, but law unfortunately cannot be used by all because it is very difficult to navigate, and it is a very long drawn process. And so unfortunately, the violence against women laws are very young as yet, only 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, very young laws. And the judiciary, that's why I wrote in my presentation that judiciary is the next bastion which we need to work with so that they can use the work, the laws are very, very well drafted, very sensitively looking at women's needs. But unfortunately, we are not able to operationalize the spirit of the law in actually interventions. So, or in practice. So I think my major focus is that in even my own work, the focus is to see how we can use law well, one, and the second is that how do we create a state mechanism to understand these laws and operationalize them better. So I did a PIL to have protection officers in every district. So the DD Act can be operationalized. We have got support person which is now in every district. Service providers in every district and many service providers per police stations. So I think we need to work towards advocating and challenging the state to be able to put all these things in place. We did a PIL to make sure that the 498 Dahan becomes toothless and family counseling centers don't take over and the SP's wives Dahan start negotiating and about the police to be able to take 498A whether it should be registered or not. I think we have to keep the spirit of the law alive and at the same time a lot of women require alternative redressal mechanisms. I think that also needs to be coming in a big way to be able to support women who do not have the capacity to use the law or do not have the money to use the law, time to use the law. So the alternative redressal mechanism becomes very important and significant. Yeah, to begin with.
To quickly respond to Chandni's question, I was just thinking what kind of courses can one teach? I think across the board all universities should teach gender courses, make it mandatory from first year to the Vice Chancellor. Right, so that can be done without a lot of emotional, verbal violence as well. So I think I would put gender, not just women's rights, but that. But I was just thinking about, this was a conversation I was having with somebody who teaches jurisprudence, to look at concepts of not legal justice, but can the state be empathetic, the caring state, or is a caring state an oxymoron in itself? So this conversation can happen in a political science lecture, it can also happen in a jurisprudence if one happens to teach law, or across, right? So is the possibility of a caring state possible, or should we only look at the state as a coercive entity? Concepts of empathy, I don't know, to evolve, to bring, these value-added courses now that, those are spaces I think we can look at. Say, I'm very intrigued by a course on intimacy, care and love, but also concepts of such kind of empathy, etc. Because you talked about violence on screen and I teach something on representation of law in films, For me, I think media courses can do that. Instead of showing violence, if there is a counterintuitive process of showing bonding, female friendship, whatever, and also break questions of gender, questions of violence. Is it possible to have conversation? I don't know. I mean, we can identify films which are, I mean, I was just reading it, and I think that's a strategy that a lot of Indian films are now doing. It can, it might not be so serious, it uses comedy as a trope, but that's a good way of reaching out, and I also find them not so violent, right? I was just thinking, though violence is its basis, the projection, and I was reading on social media, a lot of people have commented on how Lapata Ladies is a very sweet, nice, but it talks about gender, it talks about several other things, right? But the process is that of bonding, friendship, breaking stereotypes, etc. I just thought that, you know, maybe have conversations around that, use that in your course. So I think media, politics, jurisprudence, sociology offers this. I have no idea of science, so I won't be able to comment, but I think...
Go ahead, comment.
I just make a small point. Since I
just want to add a very small thing to what
Ruchira
said. I wanted to say that I agree with the course on gender, but I also think that all the courses need
have to be mainstream. Absolutely.
Engender all the courses
absolutely
which are there in our
of course.
Trupti, I want to add this to you and Ruchira. It will not help at all if it is done in the university level. It has to be done from the beginning, from the school, because
course on violence against women and looking at engendering law.
But it has to be downright the value-added courses from curriculum and in the pedagogy, and the teachers have to be trained that we distinguish between the children do not know when they are born whether they are boy and girls. We make them boys and girls. That has to stop in the curriculum. Otherwise, in the university, by the time they come, they are fully boys and girls.
No, I said this because Chandni said, what can be offered here? So.
Yeah, my comment is that we had a discourse on decolonization, and in that area, we ended up talking about gendered courses in hard science disciplines as well.
Of course.
The problem is, unfortunately, the way the textbooks have been written up to now, the decolonization aspect of understanding the knowledge base of science has been kind of, I wouldn't say neglected, but deliberately missed out. So, in order to correct these things, once you start bringing in the gendered concept, like people in biology are taught about DNA double helix as a structure, but while discussing that, it is hardly ever referred to the case of Rosalind Franklin and the biases that evolved around that time, or in other areas as well. So there is a particular UK university which has started redesigning its entire biochemistry course, whereby they insist on getting back to the other areas like the African scientists, the contributions made by them, the Latin American scientists. So this is not the gender part, this is becoming the decolonization part. So, you know, Bula wants not to think immediately about the university but to go back to the school. But having worked in the universities throughout my life, the only contribution that I can think of is that even at the university level, when we start teaching, if we could get to that level of decolonization of understanding, because that alone is going to make sure that the next generation of the teachers, you know, you can't go to the school right now because the teachers over there have been trained
by the generation of ours which did not believe in this. So, I would rather say, first, try the universities, make sure that the present generation of the students learn this, so that when they go back to the schools and the colleges, they start teaching everything in the proper way. That's all the comment.
This part I agree, because it's practical problem. We cannot go back to school. That part I agree. But I cannot agree with this binary thing of male, female.
No, I certainly didn't mention that.
No, he's talking about.
Acha,
We have our last song, because after this lot of, I guess, discourses, heated, somewhat cold, poised, etc., we have the song. And this song got Grammy Award this year. The song is in English. Performer is Shubho Parna again, and Arun is there, he's a faculty, and he plays the. Shauni and Shubho Parna will sing, and Arun will be supporting the instrumental. অনেক খিদে পেয়েছে না? খাবার পেয়েছে? এটাও নিতে পারো যদি চাও।
না ম্যাম ঠিক আছে, দাঁড়িয়ে করছি।
পুরো দাড়ি ভালো।
We were good, we were gold, kind of dream that can be so. We were right till we were, built a home and watched it burn. I didn't want to leave you, I didn't want to lie, I started to cry, but remembered I can buy myself flowers, write my name inside, talk to myself for hours, say things you don't understand. I can't take myself dancing, yeah, I can hold my hand, yeah, I can love me better than you can. Love me better, how can love me better, baby, can love me better, how can love me better. My bells, joy rain, match the roses that you left. No remorse, no regret, I forget what you said. I didn't leave you, I didn't want to fight, but started to cry, but the love will die. I can buy myself flowers, write my name inside, talk to myself for hours, say things you don't understand. I can take myself dancing, yeah, I can hold my hand, yeah, I can love me better than you can. Love me better, can love me better, baby, can love me better, can love me better, baby, can love me better, can love me better, baby, can love me better. I didn't want to leave you, but have to. I didn't want to fight it, but it did. Started to cry, but did not pour dry. I can buy myself flowers, write a name inside, talk to myself for hours, say things you don't understand.
myself dancing. Yeah, I can hold my heart. I can love me better than. I can love me better than you can. Baby, can love me better. Can love me better, baby. Can love me better. Can love me better, baby. Can love me better. So we finish on this note that I can love myself better than you. And our second one, the next one, with Center of Interdisciplinary Studies and Research and with Women Development Cell is reminiscing Rituparno as a non-conformist filmmaker. That will be on 27th of May at 3 p.m. as usual. So that is the Dohon and 19 April will be discussed as to feminist films, and Professor Ashok Vishwanathan, former Dean of the SRTFI, and Professor Shaurya Mukhopadhyay of Jadavpur University Media Studies will be the speaker. I hope that we can also have a very interactive, vibrant, and quite challenging discussions, because no antagonism, no progress. Karl Marx, poverty of poverty of philosophy. No antagonism, no progress. Thank you very much.
ও গ্রুপ ফটো না, সেটা আমি বলতে যাচ্ছিলাম, ওকে ডাকতে যাচ্ছি।